6 months ago, the U.S. intelligence community released its official global threat report. Buried inside it was a very clear statement. Iran was not currently building a nuclear weapon. Not suspected, not imminent, not active. Then just weeks later, nuclear facilities in Iran were bombed. Now we're told the nuclear threat is urgent enough to justify a widening conflict. So what changed? Was the intelligence wrong? Did the policy change? Or are we being told a very different story now than the one the intelligence community gave the country? Tonight we're breaking down the government's own threat report, what it says, what it leaves out, and why two major players, Iran and Venezuela, barely appear in a document that's supposed to outline the biggest threats to the United States. The Annual Threat Assessment, ATA, is the official U.S. intelligence consensus on global threats. It's produced by the 18-agency intelligence community. The top threats listed fall into three major categories. Tier 1, strategic advisories. These are the countries the report considers the biggest long-term threats to U.S. power. China, largest strategic competitor, military modernization, Taiwan conflict risk, cyber espionage, economic warfare. Russia, nuclear modernization, the war in Ukraine, cyber operations, disinformation campaigns. These two are treated as the only true peer competitors. Tier 2 military and WMD threats. Countries with weapons programs or destabilizing regional behavior. North Korea. Nuclear weapons, ICBMs capable of reaching the U.S., Iran, missile programs, proxy militias, cyber operations, drone warfare, regional destabilization. But here's the critical detail. The report states the U.S. intelligence community does not assess that Iran is currently building a nuclear weapon. That line becomes very important when you compare it to later political decisions. Tier 3 threats. These are non-state or indirect threats, which include terrorist groups, transnational criminal organizations, cyber actors, cartels, influence campaigns, AI warfare, and economic sabotage. Cartels actually get a surprising amount of attention because of drug trafficking and migration impacts. What the report says about Iran. This is where things get interesting. The ATA describes Iran as a regional military power, a sponsor of proxy militias, a cyber threat, a drone exporter, a missile developer. The report also notes Iran's growing military relationship with Russia, particularly through drone transfers. But it stops short of saying Iran is building a nuclear bomb. Instead, the assessment is Iran has enriched uranium beyond civilian needs. Iran could develop nuclear capability if leadership chooses. But U.S. intelligence believes that decision has not been made. Again, that's the official intelligence position. The timeline problem you noticed. This is the part that raises eyebrows. March 2025, the threat assessment is released. The conclusion? Iran is not currently building nuclear weapons. Then later, in June of 2025, U.S. and Israel strike Iranian nuclear facilities. Targets included Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. Reports later suggested the strikes may have only delayed Iran's program by months. Then, in 2026, escalating tensions and open conflict narrative around Iran's nuclear threat. So the contradiction people notice is this: the intelligence assessment, policy action, Iran not building nukes, airstrikes on their nuclear program, and no confirmed weaponization, claims of urgent nuclear threat, long-term missile concerns, immediate military action. That gap is what analysts call a policy-intelligence disconnect. The Venezuela gap, and this one is strange. You may have caught something that most people miss. The ATA spends very little time on Venezuela, even though Venezuela currently has Russian military ties, Iranian weapons cooperation, and cartel state structures, mass migration pressure, organized crime networks. There are also documented cases of Iran exporting drones and military technology to Venezuela. Yet the report treats Latin America mostly through the lens of cartels, migration, criminal networks, and not geopolitics, which is odd because Venezuela represents an Iranian foothold in the Western Hemisphere, a Russian ally near U.S. territory, and is a narcotics superstate. Those are typically big red flags in national security planning. The strategic warning in the report. Buried in the report is a much bigger point. It warns about cooperation between adversaries, specifically China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. The intelligence community warns these countries are increasingly working together. This is sometimes called the axis of disruption. It includes things like Iran supplying drones to Russia, North Korea supplying artillery, China supplying electronics and industry, Russia supplying military tech to Iran. This network is a major long-term threat to U.S. power. What the report suggests about future conflict? The ATA strongly implies the next wars may not start like past ones. Threats highlighted include cyber attacks on infrastructure. Targets likely include the energy grid, telecom networks, pipelines, and financial systems. Proxy warfare. Iran uses proxies like Hezbollah, militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and drone warfare. Iran's drone program is highlighted because it's cheap and scalable. Strategic economic warfare. China is the main actor here. The most interesting strategic takeaway: this report is less about immediate war and more about slow strategic competition. The biggest fear inside the intelligence community is multiple adversaries acting at the same time. For example, China moves on Taiwan, Russia escalates in Europe, Iran destabilizes the Middle East, North Korea launches provocations, all while cyber attacks hit U.S. infrastructure. That's the nightmare scenario planners worry about. What this means politically. From a constitutional and strategic standpoint, this raises a big issue. The intelligence assessment says Iran has capability but not confirmed intent to build a nuclear weapon. But military action was taken anyway. That raises the classic debate, preemptive war versus confirmed threat. It's the same argument used historically for Iraq WMD, Syria strikes, preventative nuclear doctrine. Whether someone agrees or not depends heavily on how they view preventative defense versus constitutional war powers. The real threat the report quietly highlights. The most dangerous section isn't the nuclear one, it's the internal vulnerability section. The report warns adversaries will target U.S. infrastructure, supply chains, political divisions, and social instability. Basically, the strategy is weaken America from inside while competing globally. Do you recognize any of that going on right now? The bottom line here, the ATA paints this picture. Biggest long-term threats: China, Russia, coordinated authoritarian alliances, cyber warfare, infrastructure sabotage, drone warfare, and nuclear proliferation. But the biggest contradictions are Iran, described as not as dangerous but not building nukes. Venezuela, largely ignored despite geopolitical ties. Intelligence assessment versus later military actions, which means the report is more of a strategic baseline, not necessarily what policymakers will actually do. Government intelligence reports often tell you how analysts see the board, not how politicians plan to move the pieces. Thanks for watching Left Coast News and Behind the Line podcast. Please like, share, and follow us for more stories about the left coast and the United States in general. You can find us on all your favorite social media: YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Brighteon, Spotify, Patreon, Facebook, Instagram, X, Truth Social, Substack, and TikTok. Visit our websites at leftcoastnews.net or behindthelinepodcast.com for more information. If you'd like to see this actual report, I have a PDF of it on the website. If you go to our website, also drop a comment and let me know what you think about this. I think it's this report is how the Defense Department decides to spend its money. So I think it's interesting that it says nothing about Iran's nuclear threat. And this is the same sort of line we got about Iraq. And I feel like history is repeating itself again. What do you think?
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.